It's so important to set up systems now that you can repeatedly do this so that you can have a mind that is clear and ready to focus in on what is important at the moment. Hey guys, it's me, Sonja of SonjaW Coaching, and I'm super excited that you're here because we're going to be talking about a little cheat code that I have for focus and how to truly live intentionally. But before I do that, I don't know if you noticed, but the angle's a little bit different, right? I wanted to show you guys a little bit more of my favorite wall. Maybe one day I'll talk about it all. We'll see. But anyway, before I get into all of that and I get into that cheat code, let me introduce myself. Hey guys, my name is Sonja of SonjaW Coaching, where we help overwhelmed, multi-passionate women learn how to acknowledge, live, execute, and win their dreams. We're all about showing women how to make sure that their dreams meet reality. Okay? So let me tell you a little bit about this cheat code for focus and intentional living. Brain dumping. I know. What in the world is that, right? Like, what in the world is a brain dump? What I can tell you is that it's going to make sure that you are able to focus in on the most important task right in the moment. Okay, so let me break it down a little bit. I was reminded about it when I was listening to a podcast that I listened to like a long time ago, but I decided to listen to it again. It had my two favorite people, and you know what, I'll put the link below because I actually really like what they talk about, and I think the work that both of these people do truly helps people learn how to get control of their lives and live intentionally. And of course, I can't remember the name of the podcast, but the host of the podcast is Dr. Caroline Leaf, and she had one of my favorite people in the productivity world, David Allen, on, and it was super good. I'll make sure I put it in the show notes below, okay? But anyway, it reminded me of this technique of brain dumping. He calls it a little something different, and you can go and listen to that podcast as well because it gives you a little bit more of a different technique. But I'm going to talk about how I do it. It's pretty similar, but there are differences, okay? But let me tell you about why it's so important. So, listening to this podcast, it actually brought home a really big idea. It brought home the idea that our brains are truly not meant to hold on to a lot of things all at once. We have we have different parts to our mind, and the first part is that conscious mind, and there's that short-term memory. Then we have our subconscious, and then our non-conscious mind, and all of that. They go into that in the podcast, so you can definitely check that out. But one of the key things that they talk about is that, you ever think about, you had a list of things to do, and if you don't write down that list, you're gonna probably remember like one or two of those things, right? Like you'll never remember it all. Well, that's just because our minds are not meant to hold on to these small, short-term things, okay? So let me tell you a couple of reasons why we have to do brain dumps. And I got my notes over here to the right. Your left? It's my right, okay? I don't know if it's your left. I don't know. But to my right. So let me make sure I don't miss anything. One of the things that they reminded me of was that our brain is only equipped to hold on to 5 to 9 things. Like if you have a list of things or a list of tasks that you want to do, you're only really going to be able to remember effectively like 5 or so of them. And then on top of that, we're not good at kind of compartmentalizing or like keeping it off to the side because we're always going to be thinking about it. One example that I always like to tell people is think about your grocery list, right? You write down a grocery list and then you remember in the middle of the day, oh no, I have to buy milk, right? But you got your list over to the side. You don't write the word milk down on that list. So all day long, you are thinking about this milk. God, don't forget to get that milk. Don't forget to get that milk. Don't forget to get that milk. And what do you do when you get to the grocery store? You forget that milk. And that is a function of our brains. We are not good at those type of things. Like we'll remember it and it will distract us from the task at hand. But then when we actually need it, we're not going to remember it. So it's so important to have a system in which you always remember your things and that you're able to trust that you'll get those things done. And that's what a brain dump will do, okay? So I'm gonna break down a few key steps to an effective brain dump. Let's go. All right, so the first thing to do is to write it down. Get a piece of paper and write down everything. Literally write down everything that is on your mind. Get it out on paper. Don't judge it. Don't qualify it. Don't try to figure out what to do next. Don't do that. Just get it down on a piece of paper. And you notice I hit on that piece of paper and not your phone, not your tablet or your computer. Because when you write it down, it moves it to a different part of your brain. It moves it to a part of your brain where it kind of like solidifies its importance or solidifies what you need to do with it. And it's no longer in that part of the brain that kind of just rehearses things, right? And that allows you to calm your mind. You know, we as multi-passionate women, we can get overwhelmed with a ton of things because we're always thinking about, oh, what's next? What's the next thing that we gotta do? Oh, I gotta make sure I pick up my kids, or oh, I gotta make sure that I write that task list, or oh, don't forget to send that email to so-and-so, right? All of those things are running around in our minds and it keeps us distracted from the most important things, right? So that's why it's so important to write it all down. So first step, write it all down. Write it on a piece of paper. Don't worry about the next step. Don't worry about, oh, did I write it down right? Did I write down all the details? What's next? Just write it down. I gotta go grocery shopping. I gotta write those notes. I gotta write that email about that thing. Write it all down. In some techniques, particularly David Allen's technique, he suggests writing it down on a piece of paper. So it might be like a little Post-it or whatever. Every single thing, just write that single thing on a single Post-it. Now that's a lot of Post-its, but there's a method to the madness. So we got that first step. Then the second step is to actually review it. Review each one of those items and come up with the very next step for them, okay? Take one item at a time and think, what is the next thing that I need to do to make sure that I can move forward with it? If it's going grocery shopping, maybe the very next thing to do is to look at your kitchen and see, well, what do I need? And start to write those things down. If that's the very next step, then write that down as the next step. Or maybe you're writing a book. What's the very next step? Maybe you haven't even started or you just have an idea. Maybe the next step is to write an outline. Now, I don't know all the details about how to write a book. I got friends that can help you with that. Those, if you're interested, I can point you in that direction. But anyway, you know, take time to figure out what the next step. One thing that I love, another example is, well, maybe you want a new haircut, you want a new hairdo, right? But you're not quite sure what you want to do. This is the time to figure out, okay, well, maybe the next step is going and Googling the hair type or hairstyle that I want. That might be your very next step. So write that down. And then the third thing is schedule or assign it. So once you figure out what the very next step is, schedule it. Take a moment to schedule when you're gonna do it. Take a moment to say, okay, I know when we talk about the hairstyle, I know I need to go Googling hairstyles. Do I decide if you have time to do it right now? And then if you do, go ahead and do it right now. Or if you don't have that time or you don't think you can get it done in the next minute or two, then schedule a time to do that in, okay? So it's so important that you have a system in which you can feel confident in that, right? So this is the time to pull out your task manager. This is the time to pull out your calendar, okay? So you take those moments, you take those times, and you write it down. Okay, I'm gonna Google search my next hairstyle on Tuesday at 12 p.m. during lunch, right? So you put it in the calendar next. So all right, we went through write it down, step 1. Step 2, review it. Make sure that you take care of, can't even talk. Make sure that you set up a time to do it. I almost forgot. I want to go back to step one. Sometimes it's so important to make sure that you have the right atmosphere. And when we're first doing this type of laying it all down on the paper, we have to set up an atmosphere in which you can actually think about all the things that you need to do. So make sure that you set up a block of time where you can do that. Take a moment to breathe. Get all your stuff set up. And then start writing the list, okay? Now back to where we were. First step, write it down. Make sure that you have everything that you need, everything that is on your brain, get it on paper. Make sure that you set up the atmosphere for that. Then review. Review it and figure out where in the world to put it, right? And then finally, schedule and assign. This is the last step, and this actually is the key to it all. That, you write it down, you put down your next step, but then you don't ever do anything with it. It's still on your heart, it's still on your mind, and you're still stressed about it. But when you schedule it or assign it to somebody, if that is what you need to do, then it is out of your mind and you can feel confident that it's going to get done. And that does something in your mind. And that's the whole point to intentional living. The whole point to living intentionally is making sure that you are putting forth what is important, that you are putting forth your values and living by your values, and also having a mind that is able to think deeply. And when you get all of those things off your brain, that is going to allow you to truly be intentional in how you do your life, okay? So I went through them all. 1, review. 1 is write it down. 2 is review. 3 is schedule or assign. And then the final step, the final big kahuna, repeat. Repeat this often. It is so important that this is not just a one-time thing, because of course there's going to be tons of tasks and tons of things that you want to do that are going to pop up in your life, and you have to take the time to do this regularly. This is the time where you have your routine set. Maybe this will be part of your morning routine, or maybe it's part of your workday shutdown routine where you kind of just decompress and list out all the tasks that you need to do. It's so important to set up systems now that you can repeatedly do this so that you can have a mind that is clear and ready to focus in on what is important at the moment, okay? So those are the things to do. Set up that system. Make sure that you have all of those things in line, okay? So if this was helpful for you, and if you want more tips about living intentionally, focusing, and building out a life that you live by values and by your life principles, then subscribe. Subscribe to this channel, like this video so I know that you like this content, and definitely comment if you got questions, if you have any thoughts or anything like that. I would love to hear about it. So truly, if you love this, go ahead and subscribe, and know that we come back every single Thursday with a new video all about living intentionally. Okay? So hopefully I will see you next week.